For centuries, the Shang dynasty was, well, it was just a legend, a story passed down through generations, but was absolutely no hard proof that it ever really existed. Today, we're going to go on a kind of archaeological journey to see how this myth became a verifiable, solid part of history.
So it really all boils down to one big question. How do you prove that something ancient, something epic, was actually real? For the Shang, it wasn't about finding some lost city right away. The answer, strangely enough, was written on bone.
I mean, just imagine being a scholar in the late 1800s. You hear all these amazing tales about this ancient dynasty, but you have nothing to show for it. It would be like talking about Atlantis. Then, in 1899, a Chinese scholar stumbles upon these bones with mysterious carvings, and all of a sudden the legend starts to feel real.
And this discovery, this was the key. This was the very first physical evidence that started turning a legendary dynasty into a historical one.
Now, these weren't just any old bones. They were oracle bones. And here's how they worked. A Shang king would need some advice, right? So a holy man would carve a statement onto, say, a turtle shell or a cow's shoulder blade. Then he'd press a hot needle to it, and boom, the shell would crack. Those cracks were read as answers from the ancestors.
And, the questions they were asking, they weren't always these huge, epic things about the fate of the kingdom. A lot of the time, they were about everyday life, stuff like hunting, or when to build a city, or even just what the weather would be like. These bones give us this incredible, direct look into their world.
So the discovery of these oracle bones eventually led archaeologists to a very specific place in 1928, the ruins of a massive Shang capital at Anyang. And this was no longer just a clue. This was like finding the entire crime scene, perfectly preserved.
I mean, what they found at Anyang, it proved this wasn't just some small tribe. The evidence pointed to a really complex, highly organized civilization. They found a central palace, temples, and even dedicated workshops for their skilled artisans.
But, as archaeologists dug deeper, they uncovered something pretty chilling. Beneath the foundations of the palaces and inside these huge royal tombs were human bones, revealing that human sacrifice was a key part of Shang ritual and belief.
See, the Shang had this really vivid idea of the afterlife, and a king had to show up prepared. His tomb was basically a starter pack for the next world, filled with everything he'd need: weapons, treasures, animals, and, tragically, the slaves and servants who were sacrificed to continue serving him after he died.
So all of these artifacts, from the oracle bones to the things they found in the tombs, they let us piece together the really rigid social ladder of the Shang dynasty.
Okay, so Shang society was super structured, basically broken down into 6 distinct classes. At the very, very top, you had the king and his family who held all the power. Right below them were the nobles, the guys who fought his wars. Then came the valued artisans and traders, the huge class of farmers who fed everybody. And then, at the absolute bottom, you had the slaves.
And the difference between the top and the bottom is just staggering to think about. A noble might spend his day hunting for fun and living in total luxury, while a slave, who was often a prisoner of war, spent his life in forced labor, only to be sacrificed when his master died.
Okay, so let's switch gears a bit. We've talked about the structure of their society, but what about the structure of their beliefs? What was the engine that powered this entire system? Well, the answer lies in their relationship with the dead.
So the absolute core of their religion was something called ancestor worship. They believed that their dead relatives weren't really gone. They were powerful spirits who could actually influence the world of the living. And to keep them happy, you had to honor them with offerings, food, and yes, even human sacrifices.
And here's where it all comes together. Those oracle bones, they weren't just for fortune-telling. The inscriptions carved onto them are the absolute earliest examples of Chinese writing that we have ever found. The Shang were talking to their ancestors, and in doing so, they literally invented a written language.
Their writing used what are called logographs, where characters represent whole words, not just sounds. And this is so cool. Check this out. The character for woman, combined with the character for child, creates a brand new character that means good. It's this beautiful, poetic logic, and it's the direct ancestor of modern Chinese writing.
Okay, so we've got this strong society, this powerful belief system, but what made them so dominant? How did they manage to rule for over 500 years? The answer was metal.
The Shang were absolute masters of bronze,
And let me tell you, this was not easy stuff. It's a really complex process of mining ores, mixing metals at incredibly high temperatures, and then casting them in molds. But mastering this technology gave them an unbelievable advantage.
And that tech advantage, it made a huge difference on the battlefield. Think about it. Armies with bronze weapons and riding in chariots were terrifyingly effective against enemies who were still using simpler tools made of wood and stone. Bronze was literally the hardware that built and defended their entire empire.
But it wasn't all about bronze. Their artisans were also incredible masters of jade. This is an incredibly hard stone, and they figured out how to saw and sand it into these beautiful objects. And for the Shang, jade wasn't just a pretty rock, it was symbolic. Its hardness represented wisdom, and its smooth finish represented kindness.
So, for more than 500 years, the Shang just dominated the North China plain. But, as we all know, no dynasty lasts forever, and their greatest strengths, their warfare and their wealth, would eventually plant the seeds of their own destruction.
So what went wrong? Well, a few things. All that constant fighting really took a toll on their armies. The kings and nobles spent insane amounts of money on palaces and tombs, which weakened the economy. And, according to their rivals anyway, the last Shang king was totally corrupt. All of this created the perfect opening for a rival state, the Zhou, to rise up.
And the ending, well, it was incredibly dramatic. As the Zhou army took the capital city, the final Shang king didn't surrender. Instead, the story goes, he put on all his finest jade jewelry and just walked right into a fire, ending his reign and his dynasty in a literal blaze of glory.
From myth to solid history, the Shang left behind an incredible legacy. Some of the most beautiful bronze work the world has ever seen, and, maybe most importantly, the ancestor of modern Chinese writing. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a whole legendary dynasty could be found just hiding in plain sight, what other lost worlds are just out there waiting to be unearthed?